Greetings, faithful listeners. This is Reverend Tashi. Welcome to part 5 of the Let's Be Real series, where we explore the concerns affecting our young people. Thank you for downloading from Rev TC Views. Your support of this podcast is highly appreciated. In today's episode, we will be speaking with the parents of young people, parents who are parents of teenagers, and those who no longer have teenagers, mothers and fathers. So with me today are Mrs. Vivette Bailey, who is mother of 2 grown daughters who are both married, so she also has grandchildren. And there is Mr. Lincoln Brown, father of 2 young adults, who he says they are 24 years old and 26 years old. A son and a daughter, by the way. And there is Mr. Andrew Brown, who is father of twin children, a girl and a boy, and they are both 16 years old. So we have great things in store. Stay tuned. Welcome, parents. It's good to have you with me today in the discussion.
Good to have you. Thank you for having us.
So we're going to get right into the discussion about the issues that are affecting our young people, and we want to get the perspective of the parents. And so we want to jump right into the meat of the matter. What would you say is the main challenge of children during the teenage years? Who wants to go first?
Ladies go first.
All right.
Well, as I recall, the main challenges of my girls were to be on top of everything. One person did not like failure, wanted to be perfect in everything, and wanted to be liked or loved by every person around her. And because of that, she would, play down an argument so as not to get on the other person's wrong side. For the other one, she was just being who she is. She did not like to be compared with anybody else, not even her sister. And she would make you know from the very beginning that I am who I am, and please don't compare me with anybody else.
Okay.
In my case, my kids were challenged because they wanted to belong. They needed to belong to an outside group that at school and community. And the expression of this was that they wanted to demand some kind of individuality. That you don't know these people anymore. They want to be something. They want to hang out where they want to hang out. And the challenge is there's a conflict here. The values that group expound didn't work out exactly match what we had at home and what we wanted to teach them. And as parents, I was not willing to let go.
Oh, so just to be clear on that bit, you're saying when they were teenagers, at some point, friendships became more important to them than
the family values
and so on.
Yes.
So it was all right. I can imagine that there are other teenagers and parents who are going through the same thing. So we will have to pick up on that later on to see how we would have dealt with that. Andrew, how about your teenagers?
Okay. My teenagers, their situation was a bit unique. As many of you know, that I went through a divorce, and my marriage broke down maybe about over a year before they reached teenage stage. So leading up to that, they had some amount of anxiety because they know that they knew I was going to leave the house. Then after I left the house now, they were concerned about whether or not I'm coming back to Manchester. The whole separation started playing out in their school life. They were getting disruptive, having their own way, being disrespectful to teachers, even to myself, when I call them, on the phone. Mm-hmm. And so they went through a whole lot. Sometimes I would get upset with them over reports from the school, but in hindsight now, I believe I should have been more understanding, even though firm and trying to assert discipline. But it took a large toll on them, and they reacted to it.
Okay.
Plus the usual teenage challenges.
Right. And I really appreciate that too, Andrew, because there are families that have been broken up in the way that he has described, and sometimes that is what affects the teenagers. And therefore, so again, we will have to pick up on that later on to kind of talk about how can we navigate through those challenges, because as he said, maybe if in hindsight he could have been a little bit more understanding, because some of the challenges that your teens would have faced was because mommy and daddy were no longer going to be together in the same house, and so they felt some of the pressure. And maybe even they probably even went through some thought processes of thinking, is it my fault? Mm-hmm. What could I have done? Because sometimes the teenagers, the children, actually blame themselves for when their parents don't really work out. So I really appreciate your openness where that is concerned, and it really does represent a large portion of our young people today who are in similar situations. Now, what kinds of questions were your children asking during the teen years? And in your case, Andrew, what kinds of questions are they asking now during the teen years that you think maybe they were pressing questions, or what kinds of questions were they asking?
Well, my children now, they are interested in knowing about my plans for the future. They're still asking me whether I want to come back in their parish to live, because they know that I am now actively looking another place to live, and I tell them no. My experience with the parish was not good. I'm not coming back. They want to know whether I'm going to have another family, etc. Yes, they ask me that.
Okay.
And they are concerned about whether I'm going to finance their college education. I try to assure them each time that yes, where college education is concerned, I wouldn't ask your mother for any contribution. If she wants to contribute, fine, but I am willing to fund everything.
Okay. So you realize that now that your teenagers are still quite concerned about the family situation. So they want to know, is daddy coming close to us? Are we gonna be living with daddy any at all again? Is daddy gonna start a new family? So they're asking those questions because there is still that need and desire for being a part of the family. And I want to speak to parents who are in similar situations, just to kind of understand that children still desire, it's almost like a built-in desire. They still desire to be with and see mommy and daddy. They want that structure. Yes. And it is still the best structure that exists for raising children. Even though God, by his grace and his mercy, will allow certain other types of family structures that, and he will help them to grow up to be good citizens of the society and so on. But, that's still God's ideal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in my circumstances, my daughter wanted to know when she would be allowed to date.
That's a good one.
My son wanted to know when he would drive. There was in the early period, they wanted to hang out with me, and then as things progress, and they got other friends, then the individuality come in now, and they ask questions like what I think about their friends. Just like Andrew, but I made my promise early, Andrew. I said, I promised everybody a first degree. But Andrea made sure they got what they got, even though I promised.
Meaning you promised to school, send them through school up to university, and then after that they can work and go back to school.
Yes.
Good.
I promised that. They wanted to know, they needed approval for some of their friends that they had. If you had a best friend, Andrea had a best friend, you think about him, so and so. Ginny would want to know, Daddy, what do you think about so and so? I would get asked questions and I get set up. If I was asked a question as silly as what I think about birth control, that's another long story, I got set up. But these are the questions they asked. Because unlike Andrew, they saw me every day. I came home every day. Andrew and I lived, the wife and I lived together. It was a family house. This was their house. They had their own room and they had most of the stuff that many of their friends may or may not have, but they had it. And I think they appreciated it, but the questions about their future, like Andrew is saying, I think maybe it's a common thread. Everybody wants to know, what is Daddy going to do? What is Mommy going to do? How we're going to get there?
Okay.
And they just needed approval from Andrea and myself and every other little thing. Even when they were asserting their own individuality and saying that I'm my own person, I need to do this and I need to do that. And as I was saying previously, I wasn't willing to let go. I was just not willing to allow them to be adults in my house.
Okay, so you were one, because eventually you will have to let go, but you were one of those fathers who, when they were teenagers and they were asserting their individuality and they wanted to behave as if they were adults before the age of adulthood, so to speak, you were just not having it because they were still your little babies. So I'm getting from you that they wanted approval, that they asked for that approval for their friendships, approval for their activities. They just wanted to know that Mommy and Daddy were okay with this. Okay, I understand. All right.
Well, I think just like Lincoln, those were some questions of my girls. They knew what we stood for, and so they endeavored to live up to it. They did not have concerns where their education was concerned,
right?
Because Daddy made it clear that they are going to go to the highest that he can afford, right? And so they wouldn't ask questions like, how they're going to go to college and things like that. But they were interested to know, at what point they stop asking, may I go here or may I go there, instead of saying, I am going here.
Oh.
You understand? Because that was the time when they usually asked to get approval. Can I go over to the Browns house? And they hear, no, they want to say, I'm going over to the Browns house and to see your reaction, right? And things like curfew time, because throughout their lifespan, they had curfew times, right? At a certain age, whatever happens, they go to bed or do whatever at certain times, right? So all of that they had, right? And one of the ways this played out was when Tony started college at UPenn, right? As I said, they are used to a structured situation where they ask, they get permission, and they are not going to do anything otherwise. Can I tell you, they cause a child to wet up from head to foot, because we say that when we are not there, don't let anybody in the house, right? when we just came over here, they came from Bethune Avenue for them to go dancing, and they locked up in the house and they would not come out, right?
Wow.
They were such disciplined children. So when Tony went to UPenn, her first term, and she came back, one of her questions were, Daddy, Mommy, now that I'm abroad, should I still ask if I may do this? Because, I mean, I'm away from you guys, and, you know. So that was one of their things.
Right.
Approval for friendship, they knew what we stood for. And like most of the time, which, you know, sometimes, no, I don't think it was fair. Most of the times, they were not allowed to go to spend time at their friend's house. Their friends could always come over. But we were not comfortable to send them to stay overnight at anybody's house, especially if it's somebody from church, then. But if it's a school friend, we don't know their background, we don't know anything, they were not allowed. So all the coming over would have been done at our house and stuff like that. So those were the few questions that they had to ask.
Okay.
And of course, one of Andrine's questions, would you imagine up to teenage, right, was when was she going to get her baby brother?
Wow. All right.
That never came up.
No, and after, well, I used to tell her a whole lot of rubbish. And when she went to high school, when she went to Holy Childhood, you know, I told her everything that the baby would do, you know, including tearing up her books and doing stuff like that. And every single thing I said to her, she had an answer for it. To the point where she said, but Mommy, you see, Tony and I are going to become big, and then we'll be able to help you with the child, right? And then now, when she went to Holy Childhood and started doing reproduction, she came home one day, because one of the things I used to tell her was that I'm too old to have a child. She came home one day and she says, Mommy, now I know that you're not too old to have a child.
Okay.
So that was one of her questions throughout, because as you all know, Andrine loved babies.
Yes.
And every aspect of the way, she wants a baby brother.
Not a baby sister, baby brother.
And you know, I think that her asking for that child was so as she could be older than. I think she wanted that seniority thing.
Okay.
That's my feeling towards her wanting a baby brother.
Right.
Not that she didn't love babies, you know, but I figured Tony was older and whatever, so she wanted somebody
to be older than. I understand. Well, you parents seem to have well-behaved, wonderful children. How sweet to hear of the kinds of questions that they were asking.
We're just sharing the happy
From
side.
the happy side. Well, that's all right.
Well, all
Not
my
the side
friends
when
are
we
happy
get
then.
But what I would want to submit, though, that I think at the core of all the manifestations of different behaviors we see among our teenagers, these are some of the questions that they all have. Questions about their future, wanting approval from their fathers, and so on. Because, you know, as I had alluded to earlier, that the ideal situation for raising children is within the context of a family where mommy and daddy are there. So if it's daddy alone, mommy is needed. If it's mommy alone, daddy is needed. Both are needed for children to grow up in a balanced and I'm speaking of a healthy family situation, because sometimes both parents are there and it's not healthy.
Yes.
It is better for one parent to be there than two unhealthy parents. You know, so we can understand that. But these are some of the recurring things. Approval. And when our teenagers do not get approval from, especially the daughters, when they don't get it from the fathers, and the mothers are not around to give the approval to their sons, they seek approval elsewhere. And there are several persons out there in the world who are waiting to give approval in whatever way, shape, or form to our young people. And that is why, this conversation is very important. And it is also important too for leaders in the church, which leads me to my next question. In your own homes with your children, was or is church mandatory? When they were teenagers, was church something that was optional or mandatory? Yeah. What's the position?
I don't think Andrew would be in that position, but because remember he says he came out before they were teenagers. But when in my house, it wasn't if or but. Put on your clothes. You have to go.
Okay.
It was not a question of not this Sunday. It's every Sunday have to go.
All right. While they were teenagers.
Good.
All right.
In my case, it was no option. Sunday was not seen as a day to study, regardless what exam you have 7 o'clock Monday morning. They have to come to church because we taught them that if God cannot help them, then sitting up all night, would not help the situation. Their dependency was on God. And they grew up knowing it so much that whenever they spend weekend out, they go on a Friday evening, and Saturday evening they're coming home because they have to be in church on a Sunday. No two ways about it.
I want to add to what Liberty is saying, because it has happened that Janelle is the study one, not Andre. Janelle is the one who studies. Janelle is the one who, if Janelle get B or C, it's tears. She likes to be, on top of her academic studies. And, she contended to say that she has to study. And she realized that when she tries to study on a Sunday, her mind is at church. So she doesn't bother with it anymore. She has responsibilities at church. She comes to execute her responsibilities at church because she realizes if she's still home, she don't get no studies done because her mind is here.
Okay.
And she told me that many times that it don't make sense.
And in some cases, when they're allowed to stay home to study, it's not always that their mind is at church. Sometimes they just don't get anything done. Because you might say, I'm gonna sleep a little later, or some other thing, or they might watch TV.
Yes, the procrastination.
So there are so many other things going on that they might just not end up studying. What would you? Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
And we were examples to our children because Alvin and I studied together during the first year of our marriage. And we study until Friday evening and that's it, right? Sunday is out of it regardless of what is happening. And so I think they grew up understanding that.
Yes.
Right? No study group, if they have to have a study group, it has to be after church. Right? But no study group during church, no weekend going together and you can't come to church because weekend the group has to be together. It was never like that.
Okay. How would you?
In my family situation now, prior to the breakdown of the marriage, church on a Sunday was mandatory. Every Sunday, everybody would have to go to church. Up to a point, leading up to the marriage, I stopped going to church with my ex. But they continue going to church by themselves. After I left the matrimonial home, whenever I call and check up on them, I would always find out if they go to church.
Okay.
And sometimes I would ask them what the sermon was about. What
Just-
did they learn in Sunday school?
Just to
you
see
know?
if they are
Sometimes
paying
they don't
attention.
remember, but based on how they responded to the question, it appeared as if they were going to church. And I don't get to communicate with them as often right now as a father should. But on the rare occasion when I get to speak to them and the whole matter of church comes up,
Mm-hmm.
they make it appear as if they continue to go to church.
Okay. What?
That is
Plus, I always tell them that I am in church every Sunday. And whenever the few times they come to spend time with me, they have to come to church.
Okay.
Okay. So they understand your position
They
then on
understand
church,
my
that church is
position,
important.
Very.
What I think we are almost out of time, almost. But I want to probe a little bit on this church thing, because the fact is we exist in a context where we have heard it said in the scriptures, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so what I'm getting from you as parents would be that you would have been deliberate in setting certain foundational values and so on as your children grew up into the teenage years and so on. You were very deliberate about that. There were some things that were just not an option, and you made it clear and you followed through on it and so on. But the truth is, and I notice in the main, we would have been talking about them studying. Because we live in a culture now, we have teenagers who are still interested in studying and they like to be on top of their game, as you said in your cases and so on. But there are parents who will allow their children to stay home on a Sunday morning or whenever the church morning is, so because they have an exam so that they can study. And sometimes the parents stay home with them, or the parents leave them at home, or compromises are made. Sometimes they end up going to classes, or they have exams that morning from extra class or some other thing. Sometimes compromises are made and so on. But regardless of that, I want to ask the question, why is church so important, or why was it so important when they were teenagers coming up, when they lived under your roof, when you were with them? Why was church so important to the point where you made it mandatory? And is this something you would advise other parents to consider as they raise their children too? Parents who have teenagers now, because if they are in their 20s and 30s, you cannot now go and say, go to church, it's mandatory. But while they are in their care, I wanted to kind of talk about why it was so mandatory, and how would you, is this a model that you recommend for parents who now have teenagers in their homes?
Yes, it is very important that you train the child, as the Bible said, to follow God's will and God's words. And making it mandatory from early in their life right up to teenage years is the time when they are taking shape mentally, spiritually, etc. And when they are brought up in that manner, it is riveted in their minds the importance of the Creator, the importance of God, the importance of trust and obeying Him. And there is a saying that if you stray, even if you stray from the Lord, once you are properly trained and appreciate God in your young years, it's only a matter of time you will come back. And it is true, when trouble take them out there, even if they stray from God in their adult life, they will remember the days when mommy and daddy usually trust in God and what God did for them, and all the struggles that they were brought through. And they will one day say to themselves, like the prodigal son, I need to go back to where I'm coming from. I need to put back my trust in the God I usually serve.
I need to leave these pigs.
Yes, and go back home.
Amen.
I agree a whole lot with what Andrew said. But then I want to add another scripture which says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you." And I would want to say that in making it mandatory helps them to understand that God is God. I don't know any other way to say it, right? And that, you know, if it's optional, we think that God is a toy. You play with him when you want to, and you don't play with him when you want. They need to understand the importance of God in their lives. They need to understand the importance of God in being in the family. And so, from your example, because it's not the fact that you are saying, go to church, go to church, go to church, right? But you are going with them. And from doing that, they can see the blessings of God. They can see how God has been dealing with you as parent, right? And they will learn to trust him more. They will learn to understand that he is the big man up there and he rules things. And as I refer to the passage, I want us all to understand that we need to seek God first and foremost, you know, and then everything else, the education, everything else. God is not a toy that we play with. God is not somebody or something, as sometimes you would want to put it, right? That, you know, you feel like going today and you don't feel. Serving God is not a feeling. It's knowing a person and having a relationship with him, trusting that person and knowing that that person can see you through from birth to death.
Amen.
I have time?
Yes. Final comment.
No, my final comment on that is that not only do I agree with Andrew and Sister Vivette, is that there's not much to add. If you have to have faith in something, and what we try to inculcate in it, when you accept God and you can put it to God in prayer, everything will fall in place, right? It's a kind of faith that if I put it to God, it gets done. And what is important about what both Andrew and Vivette have said is a relationship. You can go and ask God for something when you don't have a relationship with him. If you have no intention to play with him like a toy, as Vivette said, it won't work. You have to show our children by example that the jobs I've gotten all my life wasn't because I was the brightest one, but because of God's favor. One moment of God's favor and anybody's life can change everything. And if you don't have a relationship with the God and give your life to Christ, where do you expect this favor to come from? So that is the point we make with our children, that God and the favor that comes with a relationship with God is all yours. And that passage that Vivette quoted is a key one for every Christian should know. Your first job is to seek him out and worship him. That's your first job. Everything else will just come.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. And I just want to conclude on this topic of discussion, this particular one where we're talking about why was church mandatory for your teens when you had that kind of influence over them. The fact is that parents place emphasis and makes mandatory education. When they don't get up on a Monday morning or on a weekday and say, oh, I don't feel like going to school today, and we say, all right, don't go to school today. We say, no, you have to go to school today. And we have them going to school 5 days a week. And in the summer, if they get a summer job, they have to take that as seriously as adults do in a professional setting. And so we place a lot of emphasis on these things. But You know, there are some parents who do not,
Yes.
who are not deliberate about them nurturing and growing their spiritual side and so on. And we place emphasis on looks and fashion and image and all of that. But when it comes to the inner beauty and spirituality and training the mind in the ways of the Lord, those things tend to get left behind. And therefore, you know, it is very, very important that we advise parents to be deliberate about
Yes.
raising your children in a balanced way, which means that church and God and the things of God must be part of the mix. There we have it. Thank you so much for coming. We are already at the end of part 5 of our Let's Be Real series. We will be having part 6 as we continue the conversation on these issues affecting our young people. See you for part 6.